Yeah, we did that first stream, and then in the last couple months, a lot of people I would talk about that stream, and there's a lot of people who weren't around for that, and there's people who were around for it and said, they would enjoy another one because it's that doesn't go away, as we talked about last time. It's a constant, and I also have a completely different experience and viewpoint of what's going on at this point. And so yeah, I thought it would be a really good idea to get back into it, and it's not so much add anything that we missed, but just go into it and let everybody get the catharsis that they need to have, And I want to take it slow and go through each step and talk about maybe experiences that we've had through each of those steps. Oh, we got Stone Goku. The wisest words I ever heard about passing was, "The one you loved wouldn't want to see you miserable while they are gone. Live strong to honor the love you shared and to complement the good times you spent with each other, or you spent together. That's what they would really want." And that's something that you were saying last time, Simpmom, that you actually heard from somebody, right?
Absolutely. And Stone, you make a good point. You honor your loved one by living your best life. No one wants you to carry the torch. Think of them with good memories. But I tell my kids and my grandkids, and I had this talk with my granddaughter a number of times. She's now going to be 16 years old. I said, you know what? When Grandma's going to go, everything that lives dies. Everything that lives dies.
Yeah.
And you cry until you can't cry anymore. And then you realize, what would Grandma want? Grandma would want me to live my best life. And that doesn't mean building me a flippin' shrine. That means living your life and being happy. And if it would be wonderful if there was a switch where we could switch, okay, no more grieving. Well, it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't. There's stages. And my biggest thing is, please don't get stuck. And let me give you an example. My beautiful niece was tragically killed when she was 18 years old. She wanted to be a doctor. She was everything you'd want a daughter to be. She was brilliant. She was athletic, and just the nicest person, smart, and she was killed. And it was a tragic death because she was hit by a car and landed in her own front yard. And my mom went into a horrible depression because this was her oldest granddaughter. And my sister came to me and she said, I can't move on because Mom can't. And so I called Mom and I said to my mother, I said, we are all devastated that we lost her. We are. And I said to her, but you've got to understand, Laura can't move on, my sister, until you can move on, Mom. And that kind of rattled her. I mean, she thought she was in her own little world, kind of doing her own thing, and we were all good. But we could see how devastated that she was. But it kind of shook her, and she goes, oh, no. She goes, oh, I don't want Laura, as a mom, you want your kids to be okay. And when we realized that she wasn't okay and we called her out on it, it's like we woke her up. And that made her realize that, oh, wow, I've got to work through this so that I can help my daughter who lost her daughter. And that's all it took. So if you get stuck, realize that it's a process. You've got to keep moving. Some steps are going to take you longer than others, but don't get stuck. It's a process. And Noodles, what experience did you have?
So we touched on this very lightly when we were doing the interview a few minutes ago, but like I said, we were planning on doing a Jackbox stream, and then my best friend and brother-in-law actually died unexpectedly, and it was a huge hit. I'm not even talking about to me. I'm not talking about like, oh, my life changed. It was just how many things around you see affected by this one act or this one event. And specific person he was a figure in the community. He was loved by a lot of people. He performed for kids. He was a musician, and people knew him all over the state, and they would come to see him. People literally would fly from other countries to come and see him. I mean, that's how much they loved him. And the kids loved him, and there were hundreds of people that were affected by this, and it really showed how much love there was. And this was something that when we had our stream together, it didn't happen at the time. There was a memorial that we had for him that was maybe a couple weeks after we did the grief stream, and hundreds of people showed up throughout the day, and it was beautiful, and it showed just how much love there was and how many people he had affected. And he had a couple, still has a couple of children. And I remember thinking, man, at the memorial, I would just hate to be there and have everybody come up to me and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. It would make me feel worse. And I'm very close with them because they're my nephews. And I was talking to one of them during the memorial, and I was saying, like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, are you okay with, all these people coming up? Because we're real with each other. I can talk to him like he's an adult. And he was like, honestly, I thought it was going to make me feel bad, but it's showing me how much love there was. And he's 10, 11 years old at the time, and he had such an amazing, intelligent way of seeing what was happening. And I was so glad that he saw, what people felt instead of just the horribleness that had happened. So my situation was just, my experience with it was that I had, a best friend. He was pretty much the person that I saw more than anyone else. I was a person in my band. He was the person who got me to play music with other people. I never played with other people in my life before he literally forced me to, because I told him I was not able to. I told him I was not good enough to do that. And it was right. I was right the first few times. I was horrible. I was trash. But, he forced me to do it. And I have had some of the best times of my life, literally, playing music with him. So he changed my life forever. And when he left, everything changed.
What a void.
I mean,
what a void.
Yeah, the music has been hard to get back into. I've made a conscious effort to play with my drummer still, but it's just not the same. It's just not the same. So there's a lot of different stuff, obviously, that we will get into, but the experience is a lot different now, having gone through all that other stuff, and now, 3/4 of a year later, seeing how other people are dealing with it. The people who were close to him, how they're affected, and their personalities have, changed in some way. There's a lot to take in.
Well, it becomes the new normal for you, and it's not necessarily, it's nothing that you ever wanted, but it's just something that we have to learn to live with. Got no choice.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That is so hard. And especially he was not only a friend, but part of your professional life as well. So you got hit double hard.
Right.
You sure did.
Yeah. And whenever there's a situation with children, it's always worse because, people, you never want them to be affected, and then you never want other people to be, acting crazy towards them because of what's happening. It's just that's the situation that really always gets to me, and I always try to make the situation as good as possible. But when you're not, one of the parents, it's very hard to be there and to make that
Sure.
much of a difference.
No, it
But,
sure is. It sure is.
We try.
So, when we lose someone we love, the pain we experience can be unbearable. And so grief is complicated. But it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who kind of put it in 5 stages to kind of explain it more to us. And actually, when I was in nursing in college, I took the course on death and dying. And so we got to learn about the 5 stages. We actually had a field trip to go read gravestones. I don't know what that was all about, but
Okay.
yeah, all of us college kids out looking at gravestones, but that's what we did. Okay. So the first stage of death is denial. And it
Right.
helps us minimize the overwhelming pain of loss. And, our reality shifts in this moment of loss. I mean, we're not the same person. I mean, it's like, no, this couldn't be happening. This can't happen. I mean, we just can't process it. And so what was your experience, Nudies, with the denial?
Well, I would say the most denial was right away. It was first thing in the morning. I got a call because he had died in the middle of the night. So he was found the first thing in the morning, and I remember, I never get calls that early, and it was from my sister, and especially she never calls me that early, and that was the first thing she said. She sighed, and she said, I just found him. He died. And I just remember just saying the word "what." Like, I didn't even know how to process what I was hearing. I just like, what, because that's not a real thing. And in my head, not consciously, but I'm like, okay, if I sit here saying what enough, maybe it won't happen. Maybe it'll not be a reality anymore. And I think also my experience with denial is in the weeks after, telling myself that I was okay with it was the denial. Not the denial that he's gone, but the denial that I am processing it healthy and being okay. And I think I was really lying to myself. And I think a lot of people lie to themselves, and that's obviously why it's and I just wanted to say also that these 5 stages, you don't not necessarily go through all of them. It's not every single person. It's not a rule. It's just that this is just something to go by so you can understand what you are feeling if you are going through these things.
Feel them in order.
Yes.
It just jumbled up. They're just stages. I remember when my sister called to tell me that my niece was killed, it was like 1:30 in the morning, and you never get calls at 1:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And she said her voice was so different. And she said, I have bad news. And I'm like, who is this? Because I didn't recognize her voice, my sister's voice. It didn't sound anything like her. And I have bad news. And then she told me, this is your sister. And I said, and my first thing was, oh, Dad must have died. Dad he had heart surgery years before, and that's the order it's supposed to happen in. It's not supposed to be an 18-year-old beautiful child. And then she said, Tina died. I said, are you sure? I said, no, that can't be right. No, she was killed. What do you mean? You just can't process it. It's overwhelming. And so denial is an attempt to pretend that like the loss doesn't exist. You just can't fathom it. We're also trying to absorb and understand what happened. And so our body is kind of like in a shock. Talk from being somewhat asleep to what?
Yeah.
It's just such a horrible thing. And it was just, I'll never forget that phone call. As a matter of fact, I now have my phone turned because of that. I don't accept any calls during the night unless it is immediate family, because I still remember being jolted awake with that horrible shock. And so it's like, now I know if I get another call during the night, it is going to be bad. And my kids know that. They know that they're not going to, if you're drunk and at a party, you're not calling me. Well, if you need a ride, you can call me. Yeah, you could do that. But it was very traumatizing I can still remember that, because she was just everything you wanted a child to be. And to know that she was gone. She was going to be a doctor. She's gone.
That's the thing right there. When you think about that word, that the person is gone, because most things in life, right? Something bad happens and you're like, okay, well, this will pass, right? We'll get on, this event or whatever will be over, and then we won't have to deal with it anymore. this is a very different thing when you're sitting there thinking, oh, that's just it. That's never ever again am I going to see this person. That's it. It's a very real and scary thing to think about. And what you said is right. The denial, it helps you cope. It just makes you go, okay, I don't want to know what's going on.
I mean, yeah, it's just like, no, this can't be right. This just can't be right. And we have some comments in the chat. Did you see?
Yeah, I don't know what Corgi's talking about. I don't know what Wreckful is. Soggy Burrito says
Wreckful was a streamer, and that hit Miz very hard. A very, very, very dear friend of Miz's, and he, I believe it was suicide. Correct, Corgi? A streamer, and everybody was. He was the type of person I never knew him, but accepted everybody, whether you were homeless, didn't care what you did for a profession, whether you sweep the streets or you were a streetwalker, he treated everybody with extreme kindness. And I remember the tributes to him. And there's a beautiful picture of him at Miz's house. You know, he meant a lot to them. And yeah, the streamers were all taken back with that.
Yeah,
right,
that sucks.
right, Corgi. Yeah. But that's, you know, I mean, it's just such a jolt when it's somebody that you love. You know, when we hear about it on the news, you know, it's like with Betty White. Well, Betty White was in her 90s, and it's still very sad, and we're all going to miss her. But it doesn't hit home like someone you loved, someone that just meant the world to you. I mean, it's a different level. It's sad, but it's not devastating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's horrible, Corgi. That's usually how it happens, yeah. It's horrible memories that those people have to deal with, and that sucks. But that's a whole different thing. That's, you know, that's past grief. Like, if you are the person who finds the person who passed, that's a whole different level.
You know, and suicide is becoming too common. And that saddens me on a level because usually they're temporary problems. I mean, we all face terrible things that happen to us during our life, but it isn't worth taking your life because things are going to change. The best could be coming. You know, and if you do feel suicidal, please, please, please reach out and get some help. Please.
Yes.
Get some help.
Yes, that is very, very important. That sucks, Corgi. That sucks.
Corgi,
I'm sorry about that.
Sorry about that. And, you know, I was reading a whole bunch of things, because as I do, I love to research the internet. And another author felt that instead of calling it denial, they call it shock and numbness. And it's the same, but it's like the loss in this phase feels impossible to accept. And this is where, like I said, when you find out, you just can't process it. It's like our brain isn't wired to understand it, because we're like, no, this can't be right. This can't be right. And so we do deny it as we're attempting to pretend that it doesn't exist, and we're just trying to absorb it.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I was going to say actually is probably more suited for a different stage. But yeah, there was a time when I didn't feel anything and I didn't know why. And I thought it was, you know, I thought I was like, wow, I must be a real asshole, you know, not
You were numb. You were numb.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's why I was saying it's a different stage, because I think that has to do with the depression stage. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But
and then we go on to like anger.
Yeah.
Kubler-Ross describes anger as a loss. We're trying to adjust to a new reality, and we're experiencing extreme emotional discomfort. And there's so much process that anger may allow us to feel like it's an emotional outlet. And I think the one thing that we have to be cognizant of is that we don't want to be too angry and push people away, because we're so angry and we're so mad. And some people get scared and they back right off when we need them the most. So we have to kind of realize that, and I think that's why. Well, I remember my mom telling me that when my dad died, something went wrong in the house that needed to be fixed. And she said she took her fist and hit the table. And, damn it, Robert, why did you die? Now I've got this left. I mean, I'm mad at you that you left me. Now I've got I house things that I don't know what to do. And I remember her saying that, and it's like, wow, that Kubler-Ross was spot on, because you're mad. Darn it! Why did you do this? And did you feel any of that, Noodles?
That, I think, was the most common thing that I saw with everybody after it happened. I think specifically because it was an unconfirmed death and no one knew what happened. And so everybody was just pissed off that, basically it was just everybody's assumption that it didn't need to happen, right? Because it's not like he was in a car accident or something like that. It was like, well, they just found him and no one knows what happened, right? So now everybody's just pissed off. Why? He was a healthy person. Why? We just moved here. Why? We have a whole family. Why? It was all these things, and it was a lot of people were very pissed, and it could be at the person, it could be at the world, if you're religious, it could be at God, it could be at yourself. And I think it's really always kind of at yourself, right? Even if you're feeling that it's anger towards someone else, it's because you're not processing things and you can't, and you're just angry at the overwhelming bombardment of all these feelings that you have, and it just manifests itself as anger. But I saw a lot of people were just angry, just blaming the person for dying, regardless of why, right? Just, why did you have to, like you said, why did you leave me here? Why did you have to die? Like, it's just that there's no logical reason behind it. It just, that's how it manifests. And I think the anger starts when the reality sets in, when the denial starts to wear off. Because, once you see that as the reality, now all of this anger comes in. Oh no, now I know what really happened. Now I got to take my anger out on something because now I see the reality. So I think that's why it's usually the next one after that.
Right. What I was saying a little better than I said it. It said that the anger can leave you feeling isolated in your experience and perceived as unapproachable by others in moments when we could benefit from comfort, connection, and reassurance. So, and we do have some comments in the chat, Nudes.
Sorry, I was getting some water.
We have some comments in the chat.
Sorry, I had to wet my whistle
Burrito.
a little bit.
What's that whistle?
Happened to me, to the mom of one of my close friends when he was in his early 20s. I know it will always be something that he carries around, but he was able to keep moving. I'm blown away with where he is now in his life and career. Yeah, a lot of times you'll see other people and they'll make you feel like you kind of suck. But in other times, they'll make you go, oh my God, I didn't know that was possible. And it opens up a world to you and an ability that you have that you didn't know you had. And that's a very good thing to have. And I'm very sorry that happened to your friend. But that's a good example to have, if anything. And I hope nothing like that ever happens, Soggy Burrito, to you. But just if you are ever feeling, like you can't get through something, that's always a good example to have to go back to. Heavenly Tinkers, I've been under depression, also have lost my loved ones. That is a bad combo. That's
Very sorry.
That's when, yeah, I'm very sorry about that, Tinkers. That's when it's, you have to fight the, what do you call it? Just the cycle, right? It's fighting the cycle of getting back into those bad mindsets, because it's so easy to just drop back into them, especially if you already suffer from depression. It's incredibly hard to identify the thought and get past it and say, okay, you know what? That's not me. And so, yeah, we're going to be actually going into that in a minute with depression, but that is one of the hardest things to deal with at the same time. And thank you. Stone Goku before, sorry I missed you. And Grimsley, thank you for the follows. I appreciate that. And then Stone Goku said, that's my biggest problem. I never raise a finger towards people, let alone attack them. I have too much self-control. But when someone dies, I literally have to spend months alone. I have no ability to fake emotion, in times of death. And I become easily offended. The anger spawns from the fact that it's just not fair. Yeah, it takes a lot of energy to fake, being okay for people, because you just think that you have to, because you don't want to like make them feel weird, which is like, come on, that's bullshit. If you're feeling some way, you feel that way, and you don't give a shit how someone else is going to see it. But, everybody thinks that way. Everybody doesn't want to be judged, and does it drain you? Does it drain you trying to, put on a smile and just have a normal conversation when you're just, when you're in anger or denial still, and you're just like, screw this, dude.
And then Sagi Burrito writes, when I found myself in that depressed state from something traumatic, I forget that I don't have to take my emotions around fake my emotions around my friends, because they will understand, because I would understand if it were them. It's because we're friends. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I even have at the end things to say, things not to say, when someone passes, because you can really upset someone, or you can, usually less is more.
Yeah, you're right about that. And you know what it is? It's that people think that there is a right thing to say, and that's why people go so crazy. There never is, right?
I remember when my niece was killed, and it affected my mom so hard. And someone came up to my mother like 6 months after and said, well, is your daughter over it now? And my mother was so taken back.
Punch her in the face. Punch that person in the face.
I mean, she was so taken back. There is no getting over losing a child or losing a loved one. There is no getting over it. But she said the fact that she was that ignorant that would say it, my mother said, yeah, she's over it. like sarcastic. Yeah, she's over it.
Yeah.
Because it just took her back. And but for the other woman, I mean, obviously she hasn't experienced the loss of a child, or you'd never say something like that. But sometimes people just don't know. They don't mean to be hurtful. They just don't know what to say.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, I know. And sometimes it does come out wrong. I know.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be like, dude, shut up. Come on.
Yeah, really? Yeah, she's over it. Yeah, good. Yeah. I mean, it's like, huh?
But, Chicken Meister says, I work in hospice care, and it is very sad, although I found lots of ways to help cope with someone passing, but even then, it doesn't prepare you for someone very close passing. And you have experience with that, Simpmom.
Yeah, I was a hospice nurse, and I found it, I would say, more rewarding than sad that I could help send people home. It's the closest I'm going to get to heaven working on earth, is sending people home. I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. And it was a privilege to be there, to help the family. That was my outlook. But I mean, is it sad? Oh yeah, I'm crying right along with the family. I'm in there, I get attached to these patients, and when I'm crying right next to them. But crying is good. Crying, they have proven that the tears that you shed from grief actually begin to heal the heart. So don't ever tell someone, oh, please stop crying. Oh, no, it's not that bad. No, you say, cry until you can't cry anymore. Just let them come, because you will stop. And you'll feel better afterwards. It's like a catharsis. It will. And it does begin the grief process. And men, cry. Don't think you've got to be strong. No, this is just start the process and heal your heart.
Yeah. And that's what I couldn't cry after it happened, and I felt, like I was going to say, we'll get to it in depression, but I felt like there was something wrong with me, or that I didn't care or something, but I was just dead. I was just dead inside. I just couldn't. And I mentioned before the memorial that we had. Um, so it was an outdoor memorial, and there I forgot what it's called, but it's a little structure in the middle of a field that everybody can go inside. It like shields you from the shade, and they just lined it with pictures and everything from his shows, from the family, and so there was a huge line, like hundreds of feet long, everybody waiting to go up and walk around the little thing and look at all the pictures. And we were waiting in line, and I was talking to people that I hadn't seen in years. You know, they lived in different states that I knew through him. And, you know, it's not like we were all happy-go-lucky, but we were just, oh, how are you doing? This, it's horrible, blah, blah, and we talk. And then, thank you, Heavenly Tinkers. I appreciate that gift sub.
Heavenly Tinkers gifted a tier 1 sub to Mom's Tango. They have given 17 gift subs in the channel.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to wait for the alert to go. Thank you. And when I went up into the thing, I started looking around. I remember getting closer and closer. I was like 20 feet away, 10 feet away, and I was like, well, I haven't cried, I haven't been like emotional, this whatever. And then I went up the steps and I looked at about 2 pictures and I lost it. I absolutely lost it. And luckily, one of my sisters was already up there, and we didn't even have to say anything. I just looked at her, and I just went over to her, and I just hugged her, and I started bawling. And that was the first time I was able to cry since it happened. And holy shit, dude. It was not like it felt good, but so much came out. So much came out in those few minutes of crying. And it's not that it made me feel better, but it was just like, that was what had been, and I wasn't consciously holding it in. It was just, I just genuinely had no feelings. I couldn't feel anything. And seeing all that stuff right in front of my face, I couldn't get away from it at that point. It was just all the reality of everything just punched me in the face. And yeah, the tears are good. The tears are real, and you should never, ever hold them in or hold them back. No, that's a horrible thing.
No, that is absolutely sure. I mean, when I read the research, it was so cool. I mean, that it's like, they're there for a reason, folks. They're there to start the healing process. So let the people, as uncomfortable as it is for you gentlemen to watch women cry, and I know it is, just put your hand on her shoulder and let her just bawl her eyes out, okay? I mean, and men too, cry. It's okay. I mean, we're kind of in a society where strong men don't cry. Bullshit. You know what? When you've lost someone that you love, those tears are going to help the process. They just are. They just are.
And I think also a lot of people are uncomfortable around people crying because they just think, well, I'm here, this person is crying, I'm supposed to do something to make them stop crying.
Yeah, what do I do? But
that's not, like you said, sometimes it's just comfort. It's not about stopping them from crying. It's letting them do it. And
just grab them Kleenex. If they don't have Kleenex, find Kleenex. Yeah, that's what you can do.
There you go. There you go. But I think that's where the uncomfortableness comes from, because they think that they're supposed to be doing or saying something.
No, for sure. For sure. It is. I mean, and as a nurse and a mom, I want to fix everything. And I can't fix this. And that's hard, because you want to, well, it's going to be okay. Well, maybe it's not going to be okay for a while. I mean, it's just, it's so hard. You want to take their pain away in the worst way, but you can't. And that's where the helpless feeling is, because and that's where you are supportive, and whatever I can do, to get you through this. And it's a tough thing. And for those of you with children, take it from a mom and someone that's lost a parent. You've got to have the dialogue, just like sex. Not when they're too young. You don't want to scare them. You just want bits and pieces as they get old enough to comprehend. And you need to tell them what to do. Like I told you guys a million times, Like I told Simply and all my kids, cry your eyes out, then get up and get going. They need to hear that from you because they will be searching for anything that you said that related to death. If you should die, oh, Mom said I should do this. Mom said she'd be happy if I did this. And I remember, and I told you guys the last time when my dad died very suddenly, and he was in his 70s, but just very suddenly. He was at work, and I went home for the funeral, and then I went back to work very soon. And the hospice nurses are like, "Oh, don't you need time to off? You lost your father." And I said, "My father would be kicking me in the ass. He'd be going, get your butt back to work. My father died at work, for crying out loud. I know I would honor him by going back to work." And that's what I did. And even though my business was death, in dealing with people, I knew Dad would be happy knowing that I went on with life, and I didn't wallow. I pulled my big girl panties on, and when I went back to work.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people think that they are insulting the person that died by getting on with their life. Like, oh, I should be feeling bad. I shouldn't be doing these things. I shouldn't be feeling happy because that's like, what a horrible person I am to be happy at a time like this. And I think a lot of times people put that on themselves and kind of punish themselves and say, no, I deserve to feel bad for this amount of time because it's only right for me to not enjoy things. And you're right. You need to do what's right for yourself and especially what this person would want.
Honor them. You honor them. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've got a couple more comments that for Soggy Burrito, my parents' dad were exactly the same. And Corgi, my dad would be yelling at me if I stopped working to mourn. Obviously you have to go to the services. And it's not like I flew home to support my mom and to do that. But when I came back to Minnesota, it was like I called up and I said, "Yep, I'm ready to come back to work." They were, "What? So you kidding me? My dad died at work."
It is pretty crazy that like you not only did you go back to work, but it was work at a hospice. Like that's fucking crazy, man. That's strong. That's strong. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying like that's something that I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to do.
But I know my dad, and I know that I want him to be proud of me. Even though that he's up in heaven, I want him to be proud of me, and I knew that he would be.
Aww.
And so that was.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. But I think one thing about when you lost someone, the holidays, the first holidays without them are so hard.
Oh my God.
It's the waves, and we'll talk about the waves, how things all of a sudden you're like, oh, life's good, and then you see something, hear something, or smell something, and then it's the tears, the watershed moment comes. And like the first Father's Day, it's like I'm not walking by the card section. You find you're guarding yourself. Christmas, so I'm not. It's everything is different, and you have to get used to it. But I think the first holidays without the person that you love hits you the hardest, and then time has a way of making things less painful. And then the good memories, instead of like I'm missing Dad at Christmas. Oh, remember when Dad did this, this, and this? When those memories come, and that's nice.
And it's funny because I have a niece who is almost 3 now, so she was around 2 when this happened, and she can't really process. Obviously, she doesn't really know what happened. She just knows that he's not really there anymore, and she'll say, they'll be having fun or she'll be dancing around and she'll just go, Daddy is silly. Daddy does this face. Daddy makes this noise. And she'll just like start laughing. And it's like, that's where we have to get, we have to just be happy. Remember those funny moments, those silly moments, and just be happy with that instead of remembering them and going, oh my God, I hate that I'm not going to have that anymore. And that's a really hard thing to do.
When you're getting through the process, when there's good memories and you can sit back and say, I'm sad that he's gone, but boy, I'm glad I got to know him.
Mm.
And you can really enjoy your memories. And that's the process. When you can talk about them without not falling apart, when you can say, oh, I remember when they did this and they did that, and that'll come. And that'll come in time. And we do have some more comments.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Soggy Burrito, it's so normal to feel guilt. Yeah, it's so normal to feel guilt. You're searching for a way to rationalize and get by, and when you might find that the guilt can just when you might find that the guilt can just rush in and overwhelm. Yeah, I mean, well, the guilt, like we talked about, is, that's actually what we're going to get to in a second, Simpmom, with our next step, is the bargaining. That's where the guilt really comes in. So we will get to that in a second, actually. Button Carrot says, personally, I took a week off at my company's insistence when my father died. I'm very sorry about that, Button. I agreed to do it because my family needed me. And that's a huge thing. And we've talked about that also, Simpmom, is that, if you are feeling affected and you know other people need you, what do? How do you take care of yourself and take care of others? And that's a very serious balance, because you never want to neglect yourself.
True.
Stone Goku says, a natural passing and tragic death are experienced differently most of the time. It's hard to go in depth, but some people were entirely robbed of their lives. Then that's where I find it too much to just cope and wear a smile. When somebody passes naturally, there is sometimes a chance for understanding, and you might even get to talk to the special person before they go. And yes, that's
a very good point. When someone dies, when they're elderly, it's a celebration of life. When someone dies like very young, it's tragic. I mean, it's completely different. You were spot on. My dad when I got the call about my niece, I thought it was my dad, because he had heart issues and he's getting up there in years. And then when I found out it was my niece that was hit by a car, it was like, oh, I mean, you're spot on. It's harder to process because it wasn't natural. They went out of order. They're supposed to live to grow old. You're not supposed to lose your children. You're supposed to go first. And that can be very hard. Mm-hmm.
So then Corgi, and then we'll go to the next step right here. Corgi, my best friend lost her grandma, grandpa, and, oh my god, and mom all within 2 months or so. Her birthday was a week ago, and it was her first without them. Being there for her has been one of my priorities. Her family is basically my second family. She has been going through all this, and it breaks my heart. That is horrible. That is horrible.
Grandpa and mom. Oh, boy. Well, he goes, that, man, that's hard. That's hard, especially if she's if it's your best friend and she's young. It's like, nobody wants to lose their mom. You need your mom. I still need my mom. My mom's going to be 90 years old. I still need her.
God.
I mean, I do. And that's, boy, is that a hard one. And then you say, well, they're all together, though. I've got all these angels. I mean, there's different outlooks, but boy, that's a sad one. That's a sad one. It breaks my heart, too, that she went, and that she didn't have time to mourn each one before she was hit again with another passing. Have you heard, Noodles, that death happens in threes? Have you heard that?
I've heard that saying, but I've never experienced it.
That usually when someone goes, within a month or two, somebody else is going to go, and boy, I feel so bad for her, Corgi. It's a good thing she's got you to kind of help her through this. Wow, that's sad. That's very
rough.
sad.
So, to get back on the steps here, and I'm never diminishing anything anybody's saying. My heart goes out to all of you. So the third step is bargaining, and that's people a lot of times think bargaining, and it can be, but bargaining is like, why did you take him from me? I will do anything to have him back or her back. But it's really like a feeling of hopelessness, right? I could have done something, or if I could have been there, something could have changed. This person could have done something differently, the situation. And that's really what bargaining is just, trying to make sense in your own mind of something that could have happened that would have worked out better for really no reason, right? Because it's not something we can control, it's not something we can change, but temporarily in our mind, it puts a little band-aid on something, and it lets us have a slightly different thought than we were having, which was, you know, the denial or the anger if we're going in order.
And you know, the for me working at, the only reason that I could work at hospice and be a hospice nurse is I truly believe in my heart that that was their time, that there are no accidents. This was the time that you were going to be given on earth. And I'm not a Bible pusher, never have been. I'm spiritual, not religious. But there is a section in the Bible that it translates to, your time on earth was determined before you were put in the womb. And I absolutely believe that when it's your time, it's your time. Because before I was a hospice nurse, I was a pediatric nurse, you know, taking care of very sick children. And I can't believe there's a cruel God. I have to believe that it was their time, or I'd go crazy. I'd go crazy. And that's
sorry. I just wanted to say, and that's, you know, we're very different people, Simpmom. We agree on a lot of the same stuff, but I was never raised with any kind of religion at all, actually. And yeah, it's definitely a different way to think about it, right? Because you have that, you know, you can have that thing of like, okay, well, at least I can go on this, this is my belief, at least I can go on that. And if you don't have that, you have to find something to hang your hat on, or else it really starts getting to you. And that's one thing I kind of
never do hospice. I'm very spiritual. I'm not a member of any organized religion. It was just interesting because our director at the hospice read that out of the Bible, and I went, but I always believed that there were no accidents. I just believed that this was your time. I would go crazy to think that there's a cruel person up there wanting to do this. That's how I guess I put it to bed. It was your time. As sad as you know, losing my niece, tragic, sad. It was her time. And looking back, the year that she died, she fit so much into that 1 year. When we all sat down and went, wow. I mean, it's like she lived a lifetime in that year. So it's like she got, even though she was 18, she did so much in that year that it's like, wow, maybe, you know, this was her living, her time to live before she was taken. You know, I mean, you have to find a way. And I have to tell you, let me just give you this tidbit that we had at the hospice. Okay, I was there for years and years and years. The only person that struggled with dying was an atheist, because they believed that they were going into a vat of nothingness and they didn't want to go. Everyone else, whatever religion they were or spiritual, were accepting of the fact that I'm going and I'm ready. But that was the only one in all the deaths who struggled.
And that makes sense. I think that in a lot of ways that's I mean, you know, from someone who's not religious, I guess it'll sound a little bit different, but I think that's kind of why religion exists, is to give people a way to cope with the world we live in, right? Is just to give them an understanding of something that is literally impossible to understand. And it makes us, I mean, the amount of times as a kid I used to lay in bed, I didn't think of dying, but I would think of not existing. And it would make my head explode. I would like freak out. Literally, I would just be sitting in bed freaking out, just picturing not existing and not understanding what I'm even imagining. And it would make me go crazy. So I totally get that, like, you know, there is a very good reason to have something that you can believe that makes sense of all this shit that makes us go crazy and feel horrible all the time.
I believe there's something greater than all of us. I absolutely do. I don't know what it is, but I absolutely believe that there is. And I also believe that you take your love with you. You do. I mean, because it's not tangible. It isn't. And I think that when you die, that goes with you. And that never dies. I honestly believe that. I do.
Well, I've seen the love firsthand from that, so I could see that. I don't need to be religious to believe that.
Right. No, and I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but not religious. I just threw that fact in about the Bible because I thought that was like, whoa, I mean, it was just interesting because I've always believed that, and that there are no accidents, and the fact that it's in there, it's like, wow, okay.
This is Pris. I'm really glad, and Grimsley for agreeing. I'm really glad that this is helping you guys. That's really the point. This is the whole point of doing this, was that there were people who missed out on it, and give people a chance to join in. And again, if any of you have any experiences that you want to share, that you have felt uncomfortable sharing at other points in your life or with other people, feel free. Don't feel bad about sharing it. If you don't want to, then that's perfectly fine.
Started working at the hospice, I went out and I bought like 5 of the best books about death, dying, and because I wanted never to say the wrong thing, and I wanted to understand it better. And it's a terrible part. It's a part of life, but it's a terrible part of life. It is.
Yeah. It's the worst part.
But we need to prepare ourselves that we are probably going to lose people that we love. We are. But we're going to be able to pick up and we're going to go on. And if you get stuck, you get a book. There's a woman here in the park whose husband died. He was in my men's group, my men's embroidery group, and she was just devastated. Now he had cancer, but when he died unexpectedly, they did not expect him to die that soon. And I found a book. I went on Amazon and I was researching. I said, because I've not lost a spouse. I've lost a niece, and I've lost, my dad, but I've not lost a spouse. And I found a book written, it had tremendous reviews. And so when she called and told me he died, the first thing I did is went out and I bought all kinds of snacky foods because you don't want to eat. I wanted to just here's something to nibble on. And right. I brought her flowers and I brought her vitamins. I went out and I said, you need to take these for me. And I found this book, and she said to me, she goes, nothing has helped like that book. The person that wrote it told me every emotion I would feel, told me about panic attacks that I never thought would happen that did happen. She said, I have referred to that book so many times. And she said, I even said to the mortician, you need to give these books to people that have lost a spouse. So understand that we aren't experts, but there are people out there that are. And if you're going through something, a support group, a book, if you to help a little bit. And I've since bought this book for 2 other people that have lost spouses.
Do you remember what it's called, Simpmom?
I will look it up.
I actually remember you talking about that last time. I remember the story you said about the mortician, that she was saying that he should buy them and give them out to people.
Oh, she's adamant. And as a matter of fact, he died 2 years ago, and I saw her. She was I had a panic attack. I grabbed that book, and it went in detail how this could happen to me. And she goes, and I just felt better. And so there's a lot of self-help stuff out there. You guys, we live in a great time where we could be connected, like tonight. We're all around the world, but yet we're right in the same little living room chatting.
And
I'll look up that book.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, sorry, what did you said something that I was gonna go on. Alright, never mind. Stone Goku says, the concept of oblivion is the base to all fear. Pain and loss are laughed at, but when people realize they might not exist anymore, they experience helplessness, and through that helplessness, ultimate fear. The only security in the face of death is to live honest and good to the end. If you mess up, try fixing it the moment you realize you've messed up. but never knowingly commit wrong. Never knowingly commit wrong. We will all face death one day. And that is the way, I mean, both me and Simpmom say the same thing at the end of every stream. Treat other people like you want to be treated. And I think that's the only way to live, literally. And if you're not doing that, you are making the world a worse place, and you are a hypocrite, and you are lying to yourself and everybody else. And that's the only way to live, is to treat other people like you want to be treated.
Absolutely. I mean, we could be taken from this earth at any given moment. And it just, I mean, you know, especially with what's going on in the world. That's why I'm wearing blue. I was looking for yellow too. You know, treat people the way that you want to be treated. You will never go wrong in life. And if somebody snaps back at you, maybe they lost their job. Maybe they lost their spouse. You know, just cut people slack. We don't know what shoes. We're not in their shoes. We don't know.
Yeah. And I remember what I was going to say. You were talking about, you know, there's a lot of self-help stuff out there. And, you know, when stuff like this happens, a lot of the time, you need to be forced into it. A lot of times you don't want to help yourself. And that actually takes us into the next step, which is depression. And that is very common, that you don't, you know, there's no reason to help me. If I'm gone, you know, this is how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life. There's no reason. I don't want to help myself. You're trying to help me. You're just going to feel worse if you try to help me. You know, you're numb. You have extreme sadness. It's just a hole that you just feel like you're staring up at the hole 200 feet down in it. And how the hell am I going to get out? And that's at least in my experience, that's what depression seems like, is just an impossible wall to climb. And it can manifest in different ways. You know, it's not always outward. People can appear like they're doing okay, and they are dying inside. They are really hurting.
Depression can be so isolating.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when, you know, it's one thing to be sad. It's another thing to be depressed. Because the sadness is going to lift. The depression might not. And that's when you've got to go, how my sister lost my beautiful niece, and my sister went to support groups of people that were in the same boat. And then she did one better. And this is, my sister is my hero. My sister is my hero. She took it upon herself to get her EMT, and took it upon herself. She got EMT of the year. She saved a man's life last year. Yeah, nice. She got it and from a big hospital. She was given EMT of the year. She's in her 60s as well. She also will go to the house of someone who's lost a child due to a tragic accident. And she goes, it's a horrible club to be in, just to kind of let them know they're not alone. I mean, how she can walk into such raw pain. I mean, she's my hero. She's now the one first at the scene of a terrible accident, and then trying to comfort the parents. Jeez. I mean, it's like, you know, it's someone that was never medical, but after my niece was killed, she was like, I know the pain and I want to help. And so now, she's got all these plaques on the wall for being EMT of the year. She's my hero. She absolutely is.
And that's an amazing thing too, to know, hey, I can now put this to good use to help other people. It's not just I've gotten over it. Now I have something that other people don't. I understand something that other people don't. I was talking to someone who was talking to a grief counselor, and this person said that they had been doing grief counseling for years, and then she lost her husband, and she realized that everything she had been doing before was pretty much wrong, even though she had studied it and thought, you know, I know what I'm doing, because you don't know shit unless you went through it. It is such an insane thing to even comprehend that there's no way you could possibly understand. And even someone who is a professional, who has gone to school for it, you know, just once she went through, once she felt it, completely changed the way that she did therapy and counseling. I'm pretty sure wrote a book on it, wrote a book about how everything changed when that happened.
I mean, I've been, and I, like when when my friend lost her husband, it was like, these are uncharted waters for me. Even though I'm a hospice nurse, I've not lost the love of my life.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to reach out to an expert to get her a book from someone who had, because that's, even though I deal with death all the time, it didn't hit me. It wasn't my spouse. And yeah.
Yeah, and I see that a lot too, is that people who aren't very close, like you were saying, the person was saying, is she over it yet? And it's not like everybody is that cold, but people, you can see the layers, right? Like if it's an onion and the person who died was in the center, and you see the layers, and the further out you go, you see the people acting more regular, and the closer you get, you see how their personalities are different than you once knew, and they're acting different ways, and it's a very obvious and palpable thing that you can see.
For sure.
Chicken Meister says, I also work for a 911 service / first responder, and we always offer the family our presence at a funeral or send something, and they always thank us, and they are very grateful. In a recent class I was in, the instructor told us that doing that can actually help the family in the grieving process. Yeah, I don't doubt that. The amount of people that came out to the memorial for my brother-in-law, there was, I mean, I can't even explain what I'm like trying to say, but yeah, it's, you can never measure how much you think that's going to help somebody. It's, even if they think it's not helpful in the time because they're going through depression or grieving in general, it will help, because if it didn't happen, the situation would be worse, even if they don't want to feel like it is.
That lifts their soul to know that so many people cared.
Yeah.
It just does. It does this. When my dad died, my dad was like a pillar. It was a small town, and my dad was like a pillar of the community. Everybody knew him. And I'd been in Minnesota for decades. So, I didn't see, how he interacted all. I mean, I knew that everybody loved him, but I didn't know how much it was so cold, and the line for people to see him went outside around the block. And it was like, wow. And his boss, get this, his boss came in. My dad was retired, but he was working, taking care of where a bunch of old people lived, like housing,
nursing home?
a bunch of houses. No, not a nursing home, but like regular apartments. He was the maintenance guy because he couldn't do anything. I mean, he was retired, and his boss cried more than we did. I mean, this man, I don't know what I'm going to do without him. Oh my God. I mean, it was like, my mother was like so taken back that his boss could not control himself. But looking back, but he meant a lot to so many people, and it comforted us to see people standing in line for hours just to come in to tell us what he meant to them. And it was very it was uplifting and heartwarming.
We also follow the family to be present during a medical emergency or when we are doing CPR for the same reason, and helping with the grieving process / understanding that everything possible was done.
Boy, that's tough. That's, the one thing with hospice is it's expected. No one goes into hospice thinking that they're going to be trying out for the Olympics. This is their final, the pages of their final chapter. So that's different than, an EMT doing CPR. I mean, that's,
Right,
you're
yeah,
watching the
opposite.
and that's got to be, oh my goodness.
Right, because
you're
one person
to,
is trying to comfort someone, and one person is trying everything they can do to not make that happen, not make them, but let them die.
I mean, that's, kudos to you, and all of you EMT
amazing.
workers. I don't know that would have been anything that I would have ever wanted to do, to be first on the scene, and my sister, it's like, she actually, the same family lost two kids, and one was to a suicide gunshot. and she's first on the scene. And it's like, oh my God, no. Hospice is completely different. And we had talked about that earlier, how it's not the traumatized death of someone instantly dying. And it's different.
And just to one thing, because I said I was going to mention it before when we got to this step, that, when this first happened, I'm pretty sure I felt depression. I went through all these stages at some point, but depression was an overarching thing, in combination with all of them. And I remember, like I said, not crying and just thinking that there was something wrong with me. And I believe I was talking to you one day, Simpmom, about it, and I kind of just realized that when I said it out loud, that I just had no feelings. And then I was like, wait a second, I'm feeling depressed. That's what's going on. Because, when we were doing that interview before, I told you that starting the streaming helped me with my depression for like a month when I first started. And so when I realized that, when I said that out loud, I was like, hold on, this is how I felt like all the time. When my depression was at its worst, I felt nothing. And that was a big realization, that I wasn't, being cold. I just was incapable from having any emotions at that point. I just like shut down, basically.
Yeah, well, you had to survive. You had to find some way of coping, but like I said, sadness and depression are two different things.
Yeah.
So yeah. Please, if you find yourself where you just can't shake it, you got to get some help. And it's a sign of strength that you do this, not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. I mean, yes. If you hit an ear infection, would you? Oh, I'll just let it go. No, you're going to go get professional help. The same thing is when it's your mental health. It's health, your mental health. You need some help.
Definitely. Chicken says it's very tough on the families, but also on us. Coming from a small town, we know everybody, and there have been countless times where I have had to excuse myself from a patient because I know them. We are required by our state to make a mental health first aid class to keep our medical licenses. That's good. That's good. That should be being taught everywhere.
That would be, these small towns where everybody and everybody's situation, and wow.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. Kudos to you.
Yeah, chicken, you are the master. You are the master of chickens.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So when we finally get through the depression part, or, it's never like, there's always a part of our heart that's broken. It's like the heart is broke, but there's a scar now. So it's still there, but it's not an open wound anymore. Right? But we learn that we accept things. We accept things now because we have to. We have to figure a way to go on. And it's not that we don't feel the pain anymore. And it's just that we have to find a way to move on. And acceptance is, to me, is when you can talk about the situation without completely falling apart. Because the grief is going to continue to come in waves. I've got a nice write-up about that. And but Noodles, what about you? What about you with your friend and acceptance? When do you feel that you're there yet? I mean, it's still been not that long ago. Do you feel that you've accepted it?
I think there's still a mix of a couple things, but I mentioned this last time we did the grief stream, and I want to say it again, is that I think there's like a 4.5 step, and that's false acceptance, and that's when you think you're accepting it, but really you're saying things like, well, I was having a lot of fights with this person, so it's okay that they died. Things like that, where you make an excuse or you make a reason where that it's not right and it makes no sense, but it's your way of kind of telling yourself that you accept even though you don't yet. And I saw a lot of that. I probably did that a little bit, but I'm getting to the acceptance. I was talking about how it was very hard listening to music. There was one song specifically that my friend used to sing, and listening to the recording of him doing that, it just hits me in a certain place when he just like belts out one of the lines, and me and my drummer finally, it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, finally played it together for the first time since he died, and I sang it, and I was just like screaming it basically, and it was just like, I don't know, like we both heard him there. We both heard him singing even though he wasn't there, and it just felt like all this was being released out of me as I was just screaming out the it's not like a angry song. It's like a reggae song, but I was just like belting it out, and we were just it was amazing. It was amazing, and that to me was a huge step towards acceptance for me, because not only the music but that song.
You made it through the song?
Yeah,
you made
we
it
played
through the whole song?
thing. Yeah.
Good deal. I mean, that's good that you didn't. I can't do this. I mean, the fact that you did do it, and you did have the release from it, and
it was
yeah,
amazing.
I mean, I think that's a huge step.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to do that, because sometimes songs will reduce us to tears, you know, because of the sentimentality of the songs, and that Eric Clapton song about
Tears
his son.
in Heaven.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I mean, just.
Yeah. And this was a song that he actually wrote. So he wrote it and he used to sing it, but we all played it together, you know. So this was the first time that we played it without him singing it. It was the first time we played it ever, and you know, it's honestly one of my favorite songs, like ever. Not just that we do. I love that song. It's so good, and yeah. So that was a huge step. That was a huge step. So I you know, I never can say I'm there, but I would like to say that I'm closer to it. And I want to read what Koala said here. When I lost my mother and grandmother last February, I really felt like a zombie for a couple days. I would eat, sleep, do everything that I was supposed to, but was numb. I looked myself in the mirror and reminded myself that they would not want to see me like I was. So I came up with a plan that I've stuck to, where I give myself one night a month, where I just let the pain out, cry my eyes out. I've always blamed things. Whenever I cry, I don't know why, but it relieves the pain. Well, we talked to Koala. I don't know if you were here before, but we talked about how good, cathartic, and healthy it is to cry. And if you need to every day of the month, you should. It's good that you have a path. And I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry.
Very sorry for your loss. Very sorry. That's a big one. Mama and grandma, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
I want to read this about grief coming in waves. I found this from the Loss Foundation.
Okay.
As for grief, you'll find that it comes in waves. When the ship is first wrecked, you're drowning with wreckage all around you. Everything floating around you reminds you of the beauty and magnificence of the ship that was and is no more. All you can do is float. You find some piece of the wreckage and you hang on to it for a while. Maybe it's a physical thing. Maybe it's a happy memory or a photograph. Maybe it's a person who is also floating. But for a while, all you can do is float to stay alive. In the beginning, the waves are 100 feet tall and crash over you without mercy. They come 10 seconds apart and don't even give you time to catch your breath. All you can do is hang on and float. After a while, maybe weeks, maybe months, you'll find the waves are still 100 feet tall, but they come further apart. When they come, they still crash all over you and wipe you out. But in between, you can breathe. You can function. You never know what's going to trigger the grief. It might be a song, a picture, a street intersection, the smell of a cup of coffee. It can be just about anything. And then the wave comes crashing. But in between, there's life. Somewhere down the line, and it's different for everybody, you'll find that the waves are only 80 feet tall, or maybe 50 feet tall. And while they still come, they come further apart, and you can see them coming, an anniversary, a birthday, Christmas. You see it coming for the most part, and you prepare yourself. And then it washes all over you, and you know somehow that you will again come out on the other side. Soaking wet, buttering, still hanging on to some tiny piece of the wreckage, but you'll come out. Take it from an old guy. The waves never stop coming, and somehow you really don't want them to. You'll learn, you'll survive them. And other waves will come, and you'll survive them too. And if you're lucky, you'll have lots of scars from lots of loves and lots of shipwrecks. I like that.
I love that, Simpmom. I love that.
It's so true. It's so true. So I did find something kind of, what do you say? Words of comfort for someone that's grieving. And Ratuda, wasn't that, I mean, that kind of describes it. Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm over it. And then you see someone who looks just like the person or smells like them. Maybe it's a smell. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God. I mean, it just happens, just like a crashing wave, it just happens.
And to actually go on that, sorry,
go
is
ahead.
that something I learned that we talked about last time also is that you were saying not to get stuck anywhere. And one of the easiest ways to know that you are stuck is that grief, like you just beautifully said, comes in waves, and depression does not. Depression will keep you down and hold you down. And if you feel that you don't ever, get to take a breath above the water, if it's just constant, then, then you know that something is going on that should not be going on. And then you really need to get help for the depression instead of just, for the grieving process. So that's something to look out for.
And also, if, keep tabs on the person that lost someone. Because like my mom, she didn't realize that she was stuck in depression. She didn't even see it. My mother has never been a depressed. She's always been happy and full of life, always. Wonderful mom. But when my niece was killed, she went into a depression. She didn't see it. It wasn't until I said, Mom, we had to wake her up a little bit. So somebody needs a tap to say, hey, it's one thing to be sad, and we're all sad. It's another thing that you're depressed. You got to move on with the grieving, and if you can't, you need help. Whether it's support group, the doctor, a book about it, you need to get some help, and please do.
Yeah,
I mean, we all react differently. We all react differently.
And a lot of people, will think the support group, oh, that's weird. I don't want to sit in a circle or whatever. And they have support groups on Facebook now. It's not the old school thing where you have to sit in a gym, on some folding chairs. You could just talk to people wherever now, online, anywhere.
And Ratuda makes a very good comment about a pet. And a pet, like we just lost, we just put our beloved Sophie down. That is hard to me. I mean, that's when you have a creature that loves you unconditionally and is part of your family for years. That should never be minimized. I mean, that's a huge loss. And you go through the same stages because you're without your beloved pet. Don't ever minimize if somebody is lost a pet that they loved. It's the same, oh, it's just a cat. No, it's not. It was a big part of their life. It's just a dog. No, it's not. It was part of the family and part of their life. So never minimize someone's feelings because we love our animals and they, I'm glad that you brought that up because sometimes it's as hard to lose an animal as it is a loved one or a regular human. It just is. It just is.
Yeah, and I know Ratuda had lost her rats recently, and I loved those. They were so adorable.
Rats?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, whatever creature you love.
They're adorable.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so
Chicken Meister
sorry.
says always check in on them. They might not think they need it, but it really helps. That cannot be overstated. I mean, the amount of times that someone has just said like, oh, like if I get a call and someone it just says, hey, I was just, I just wanted to see how you were doing. That is huge. That is huge, especially for someone who has depression, who kind of like the thought is baked into your head that like no one gives a shit. It's a huge thing to do that. And that's not just for depression, for anybody that's going through any hardship, checking in on them and just asking how they're doing, just asking if they need to talk, going and hanging out with them. I know from experience that people will never ask you to come over if they feel bad. But if you say, hey, I'm going to come over, they'll be like, oh, okay. So sometimes you just need to do it. You just need to spend time with people.
And just say, I just wanted to drop off some cookies. I just wanted to drop something off. I mean, have a reason to do that where they can't say no. And then you can see firsthand how they're doing. You can physically see it. Hey, I just wanted something I wanted to drop off real quick. And they'll appreciate that. They absolutely will appreciate that.
There were a lot of lasagnas. A lot of lasagnas came for some reason.
Lasagnas is a good thing. It's a very good thing. It's a very good thing. Yeah.
So Goku says, I don't know how other people feel, but I live in this, in the name of life, not death. Every life taken so far has strengthened my resolve on how I feel. So I live to prove life is beautiful, and to defend that beauty. I now do what it takes to be giving instead of taking. That is awesome, Goku. I love that.
Awesome. And Ratuda said about his childhood dog. That was part of your life. There's nothing more. The dog the one thing about dogs, and we're huge dog people, is that they love you regardless. They don't care that you didn't comb your hair. They don't care you didn't change your clothes. They just want to love you. And when you lose that love from that dog, it's heartbreaking. It just is. We experience that. We've got our favorite dogs that we're still sad about. And we know we gave them a good life, but you know what? It's a good thing that animals don't live as long as we do. Can you imagine them being without us because they outlived us? So it's a good thing that we get to have our heart broke a few times during our lifetime rather than have their heart broke because we're gone, But that's the rats are adorable. Well, I did not see the rats. So I came across this article and I thought it was kind of nice that words of comfort for somebody that's grieving, because we kind of fumble with that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no rule book. It just is do what's best for you throughout the grieving process. Okay, but don't say, well, you're going to get over it. It was his time. Say the best thing is, I'm so sorry. I'm so very sorry. But don't be afraid to talk about the person. I remember when Jim came into the room and he did this. They want to hear what from their loved one.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Say something about him. If you have a story, share it with the family. We had Olympic gold medalists speak at our conferences, and one of them passed away. And I reached out to the family and I said, I have a picture of him sitting at a park bench next to Ronald McDonald. And that was the last known picture of him ever taken.
Oh,
and
wow.
I said, and I promised him I would never publicly ever put this picture out, but it was a life-size Ronald McDonald, and he was a great guy. And I said, would you sit next to him and I get a picture? He goes, yeah, but don't ever share. I said, no, I won't. And I shared that with the family, that I have a picture of him because he was such good-natured. And I also shared the story of how he was so humble when there was a cleaner, the maintenance were cleaning, and he was there, and they knew that he was a gold medalist. And he said, do you want to hold my medal? And how that person lit up like it was Christmas. And I shared, with the face, share.
Yeah.
Because people are, you know, when you send a greeting card, when you send a card of sympathy, if you've got something that you can share in that with them, because we're clutching at anything, you know, when someone that you love died,
Oh yeah.
we're clutching at any memory, and hearing these stories that we would have never heard, that you shared with that person, you know, it's wonderful to hear it. It's wonderful
Chicken
to hear
says
it.
when one of my best friend passed away, our friend group every time we were together would always share a memory about them, and it helped us through the process. That's great. That's a great idea.
You know, things that only you could know that they would, you know, I bet you've got a lot of stories that you can tell your nephews down the road. You know, I remember the time that he, you know, just tidbits that only you know
And you
that you
know
could
that
share.
that really sticks out to me too, because a lot, you know, there were a lot. So people are very awkward, right? Because like you said, they don't know what to say. And there were times when I would be around, you know, my family, the people who were even closer to him than I was, and there would be that dichotomy in my head of like, okay, well, do I just try to like talk and be normal, or do we say whatever we want to say? And if I have a memory of him, do we talk about it? And you know, there were a few times that they would take it upon themselves to say like, oh, I remember, you know, when he would do this, and oh, what an idiot, you know, he did this stupid thing, or we did this funny thing. And there are so many times when out of nowhere someone will just say that, and we'll just laugh about it. And so it has made me understand, and it's made me more comfortable doing that. And I think it helps other people. It also helps me. But it's good to know. It's good to know that that's an okay thing to do,
I
to
just
bring up memories.
read this. Yeah, the memories we have for those who are left are our ultimate consolation, and that's true. That is so true. So be sure to share. You know, if you send a card, and I try to do that. There was um oh, trying to think what I wrote in one card. There was somebody that I thought hugged the moon. Oh, Noodles, go ahead and talk. I'm trying to think about this story, and I'm trying to see if I can
Oh,
remember what I wrote.
um,
Um, oh, I remember.
okay.
It was this one person that I really here, someone that I got to know here who passed, who I thought was just the most kind and generous and wonderful human being. And I got up to speak. We have sometimes before COVID, we would have services right in the park for people we lose. And I just thought this person hung the moon. And I said, I got up and I said, you know, and this was kind of religious in a little way. So just take it. I said, you know, there's a lot of God makes a lot of humans, but only a few masterpieces. And he was one.
It's very sweet.
So, I mean, just because I just thought the world of him. But
Yeah. It's, you know, and not only just to like reinforce the good things, but to just get, because people who are going through grief are always, you know, if you are in that bad place, you're in that cycle of bad thoughts. And if someone shares a memory that just makes you chuckle for a second, or, you know, remember something, oh man, I haven't thought of that because I've been thinking about this depressing stuff. And, you know, it's things that you don't think will help a lot of times have the biggest impact on people.
right. And this person was a big part of their life, and the memories are all they have now. So any new ones that they haven't heard before is like a treasure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you know, less is more. If you don't know what to say, all you have to say is, I'm so sorry for your loss. I mean, you don't have to justify anything. You don't have to, well, you know, just, you know, well, he suffered a lot. You don't even want to go there. You just, less is more. Less is more. Much
Yeah.
more.
It's it's funny seeing how weird people get. Thank you, Void of Life. Thank you for the follow. It's funny seeing like how weird people get. Like I was at the park, you know, with my sister and my niece, and there are people that they know her, and you know, they just are so weird and awkward, and you know, we were talking about it and like laughing about it afterwards, but you know, she was saying that was what made her feel worse in the beginning, is that people, yeah, they don't know how to act, but then it makes you feel even stranger because you feel like it's because of you that they're act, you know, it's not, you don't think it's because of they just don't know how to act. You're thinking that it's something, you know, your presence there is what's making them weird, and then it just creates more awkwardness. And I remember we were like pushing the kids on the swings, and the other parents were like, they were just saying things that were normal, but there would always be this like long drawn out awkward laugh after everything they said, and I just wanted to be like, dudes,
So
just calm down.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
People
just like
are-
calm down and be normal.
Well, but we can't be. You know, I mean,
No,
it
no.
comes at a time when we don't want to say the wrong thing. You know, we want to say everything right. We want to take away the pain. We want to make it better, and we can't.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't. And so we just need to be sympathetic, check in on them. You know, close friend, relative, check in on them, and let them talk. Let them talk. You know, I have to. When I was a young nurse, very young nurse, I did some private duty, and as I got at this age, I would have known better, but I was young and stupid, and I went to. I was taking care of a SIDS baby, and she had another baby that died of it, and I just everything. You know, when you have like the name plaques on the wall. They always included the dead babies in whatever they did for Christmas, and the dead baby's name was everywhere. And I was just kind of like, oh, when are they going to get over it? Take that baby's name down, you know? And it's like, why would they? She gave birth. She was a mom to this child. I mean, it's funny how you see things differently when you're younger. To me, it's like, I'd kind of think taking his name down and they'd be able to get over it and move on. It's like, there was no getting over it. This child was born. This was a soul. We should be celebrating what time we had with this child. And it's funny how you see things so differently as you get older, you know, and it was just, I look back and I go, man, what a dope. But then again, I didn't have the internet. I didn't have didn't know. I mean, I was just doing private duty for the living child, and I didn't know about death. I didn't know about things like that. I didn't have much experience with that. I was just in my early 20s, and I mean, I never said anything, but I just thought to myself, why is that baby's name appearing on everything? And it's like, well, why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, dumb. You know, live and learn. Live and
that's
learn.
a weird thing about, like, if you're not in the situation, that people think like, well, it's time to get over it. I have, so shouldn't they? It's like, wait a second, that's not how it works.
No. This becomes the new normal.
Yeah.
I mean, it just does. It just
And
does. And
I
we
wanted
just
to mention that too, that the acceptance thing, it's like not about like, oh, okay, I'm happy now, so it's acceptance. That's not how it works.
no. Your heart is still scarred, and your heart will always carry that scar. It's just not bleeding, but it's still scarred.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But you know, my biggest takeaway for all of you is if you have children, like I said earlier, introduce them to the fact that all things that live will die. And as they get older, tell them that, you know, sometimes things happen. But if anything ever happened to me, not that anything's ever going to happen to me, but if anything ever happened to me, this is what you got to do. Is it, you know, you cry till you can't cry anymore, and then you live your best life, because I'm up there watching you. All right? And just make it benign. Don't make it traumatic. You know, because kids, you don't want them worrying. I remember when Tool, my oldest son, saw Lion King, and I shared this on our last death thing. That was his first introduction to that things die, when he watched Lion King the night before.
Biscuit just said that.
What? Biscuit just said what?
He just said,
Just
show them the
oh,
Lion King.
Yeah. Well, he must have been 7 or 8. And he saw that the night before, and he got up first thing in the morning, and he had his arms wrapped around Larry's legs. He goes, Dad, I don't want you to die. And he was sobbing his eyes out, holding on to those thunder thighs. He had his arms wrapped around Larry's legs. I don't want you to die. And he was just sobbing. But because he realized that life can end. And I mean, he got that in the cartoon. And it's like, of course, we reassure him, oh, honey, you're going to be an old man before anything happens to us, and but that's...
Right, Biscuit, not the time to talk about that you want to have sex with a cartoon.
Hey, Biscuit, how you doing?
Zillium, same
How
thing. Same thing applies to you.
Hey, but you know what? You got to have humor. Absolutely. Humor has a way of breaking through stress. When it's at the right time, okay? You don't want to yak it up at a funeral. Oh, I've got to. And another thing. Oh, let me share this story. So Larry's grandfather died, and so my sons would have been 6 and 8 at the time. When my niece was killed, I did not bring them to the funeral. I did not. And they would have been about the same age. And I'll tell you why I didn't. Because it was traumatic. And everybody there was just beside themselves with grief. And it was horrific. And I didn't want them... I mean, they knew she died. They knew that they weren't going to see her again. But I did not want the trauma. And my father's like, you've got to bring those kids. And I said, no, Dad, I'm not bringing them to this. It's too traumatic. And so when I would say a couple months before or after, I'm not sure, Larry's grandfather died. And I knew that at the showing that it was a celebration of life. He was at almost 90. So it's a different scenario. So I brought the boys in to see Grandpa in the casket. And on the way in, Larry's grandmother said, to my horror, she said, oh, go up and see Grandpa, he's sleeping.
What?
And so I'm thinking, oh, God, oh, no, you never do that. You use the word died or dead. You don't, even pass away is confusing to a kid, right? You tell it what it is. And before I could explain that Grandpa wasn't sleeping, we all, Larry, myself, my daughter, and the 2 boys, we walked up to the coffin. And my youngest son, simply wasn't born at the time, saw him in there and he went, trying to wake him up. Larry's hands went down on that kid's shoulder so fast. I mean, it was like we were horrified because he was going to wake up Grandpa. I mean, he went right in the casket to try to wake him up. But actually, that turned out to be a light. Oh, he's laughing. Remember that, Larry?
Yeah. No, but what happened was we went to him and said, what are you doing? Trying to wake him up?
Yeah. Did you hear that?
Yeah, you sleep.
Yeah, we said, what are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to wake up Grandpa. Like,
It was a good thing.
but that happened. Then everybody was shocked first, and then people chuckled. And it was a light moment at that time. Huh? Oh, you guys didn't hear that, did you?
No.
Dad goes, anybody tell you that you're cute?
I think one person, at least one person, says it every stream.
Yes. Yeah, but anyways, we were mortified, but it turned out to be a lighthearted moment. But don't ever tell them that they're sleeping. And I remember, and somebody was telling the story. I think it was Larry's brother. He said, all of a sudden, Larry's hand went down on this kid. What are you doing? I'm going to wake up Grandpa. Okay.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I mean, a good thing it was a kid doing it, right?
Oh, yeah. And another story, I have to tell you another story. With my daughter, and this is before I met Simpdad, I wanted to introduce her to death, and she was a very, very, very smart child. And I think she was 5, and an elderly person died. that I'm going to take this opportunity to bring her in to show her a dead, the person died, and everybody is calm. And so I brought her in, and we got on the kneeler, and I said, we say a prayer, and she goes, why is everybody here? I said, well, they want to say goodbye. And she saw all the flowers, and she just thought, wow, okay. And then I was dropping her off to daycare when I was going by a cemetery, and they were actually lowering a casket. So I quick pull in to a cemetery, and I grab her, bring her over. And I said, you remember when that person, the grandpa, was dead? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, this is what happens now, is that they lower the casket. Remember that casket he was in? She goes, yeah. And they lower him in the ground, and then they cover him up. And then I said, see those gravestones, those big stones? And then they put that on top. And she's like, okay. So she must have been 5, 4.5 or 5. And so she's in the car, and she goes, okay. She goes, I think I have it. So when somebody dies, they put him in a box, and everybody comes to say goodbye, and they bring flowers. She said, and then they dig a big hole and put him in it, and then they put a big stone on top so he never can get up again. It was, that was her understanding of death.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they put a big rock on him so they never can get up. It's like, well, no, that's not why they do that, but that was her understanding. But it was nice that I could bring her somewhere where there wasn't trauma. That death was a part of life, but not, an introduction where it wasn't trauma. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to introduce them.
Where people aren't just hysterical. It's like, well, he lived old, and he died because he got old and couldn't live anymore, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no zombies, Prince. No zombies.